welcome back. I talked to a lot of people before the holidays, and be honest with you, not everybody makes a cut. Sometimes we talk about this, and not everybody gets to be on the Kangaroo Leadership Podcast. We are small but mighty, and we got a good listening bunch, and I just want to make sure we add value to people. Zach and I had a conversation a while back, and we found some similar passions. But I love people that are a little bit younger than me that got their stuff squared away. They've taken life's lessons and used them the right way. And I think that's what we're all kind of looking for. I was talking to somebody the other day. I'm going to be 60 next year, that's kind of a thing, Zach. It's a little bit of a thing. We may weave that in there. I'm going to be 60 next year, which means when I turn 60, I will have served half my life in the United States military and half as a civilian. So that's kind of weird, right? But you start to look about how do you contribute at 60, and I think the best way to do it is to have conversations with people like Zach. So, Zach, thanks for being here, man. We are going to run through a bunch of stuff. As I promised all my listeners, we're going to end up in a rabbit hole we didn't even think we'd go down, but that's all cool because this is all about you. So, yeah, Zach.
Thank you very much for having me. It's always a pleasure to chat with you. I really enjoyed our first conversation, so I'm sure we will have some fun this time. And just before I get into me, I just want to recognize such a wonderful thing that you just said, in that a way that we could serve, or one of the best ways that we can serve, is in having conversations, because that's how the whole world operates. Everything in the world is just people walking into rooms, be they physical or virtual, and saying things. Having conversations is what makes everything in the world function, and not enough people are having the right conversations or the meaningful conversations. So kudos to you for recognizing that, and hell yeah, let's have some conversation. But I'm Zakaryia Frank. 29 years old, born and raised in New Jersey, spent some time traveling though. And I've been a little here and there in my work life. I've done a variety of different things. Right now I run a charity organization that educates people on holistic ways to heal or prevent cancer. And I also run a podcast of my own. And that's what I'm here to do. Just have some chats about some good things and help the world.
So Todd, let's run down the first rabbit hole that we both kind of open. So I have a keynote speech that I give when people have me come to their organizations. Usually they say, "Oh, we've got this gap," or how do you lead millennials or Z's and all those type of things. And the speech is called "Closing the 25-Yard Gap." I won't give you the whole speech, but it's predicated on the distance in a military barracks. The basic training barracks is about 25 yards from one end. If you're at one end of the barracks and you happen to be a leader like I was made a student leader, a squad leader, how do you lead the guy that's on the other end of the barracks? Where I come from, a dairy farm in small rural Northern California, and the guy on the other end of my squad that I'm leading is from inner city Philadelphia. How do you do that without closing those 25 yards? There's no way. There's no way. I kind of smile when you said I'm from New Jersey. That to me is a thing. My wife is from Connecticut. I've spent time on the East Coast. I usually can pluck people from New Jersey, or at least or that greater New York area. I can pluck them out of a crowd that quick. Some of it's, and I'm going to use some words here that they're not negative descriptives. There's an attitude that people from New Jersey, they have. And that's just, it's not that, Chris Christie used to always say, well, if you want, I'm from New Jersey and it's going to be blunt, Good for Chris Christie, because there's a lot of clarity in his life and there's not a lot of ambiguity. But for some reason, from your part of the country, people carry themselves with a lot of confidence, and you're just okay navigating whatever space you're in. If people say, I don't love you, you go, well, for every one of you, there's 9 that do. And you just kind of move on. I actually appreciate that. Yeah. But when you talk about conversations, so I'm 30 years older than you, but I don't see that as a gap. I see that as an opportunity. And so talk to me about, because now we're down to communication. Talk to me how you navigate that as a 29-year-old guy. You're aspiring to do things. You're smart. You're not. You got some world under your belt. Talk to me how you approach that in all different avenues, to include spaces that you'll never be. Right? You'll never be a woman. You'll never be black. We can go on and on and on about all the things you're not. But there's a way to build empathy and to learn, and it's through this phenomenon.
Yeah. Well, I think ultimately the keystone of any communication is first comprehending oneself. If you don't understand your own positioning in the world, your own mental structures and things that go on in your head, and why you are the way that you are, and why you choose to be the way that you choose to be, if that's conscious or unconscious, without understanding these things first, you'll never really be able to connect with that other person, whoever that other person is, whether they are extremely similar to you demographics and personality wise or completely opposite, right? So I think it first comes down to analyzing ourselves and introspection, because all things are relative, right? And we relate to others. Well, if you don't know what you are, how can you relate yourself to that other person in the first place? It's I think that's an initial part of it. But yeah, I think a secondary part of it is, I guess, is just understanding human psychology and what brings people to be the way they are, and being able to peg who is in the driver's seat of their own mind and actions and who isn't. Because very few people even are. And if you don't understand that, a lot of behaviors and actions and verbalizations aren't going to make a lot of sense.
Boy, Zach, but that's scary, man. You're asking people to look inside of themselves and kind of identify themselves, which sometimes you need to identify your bias. Some people would call that your prejudice. And sometimes you need to analyze your assumptions and then see if they're even remotely close, which you've got to do some exploration to kind of figure that out. But the other thing is you're asking people to jump in this 25-yard gap and just get her done. That's not normal. It's not natural, right? We always joke, we say, well, we should just take that guy and we should drop him off in the middle of X, Y, and Z. And in a month, his whole attitude will be changed. You know what? I actually agree with that, because after 30 years of military service, I was a guy that got on a plane and ended up getting dropped in some place that was that place for sometimes longer than a month. And when you come back, you're different. You should be. If you've taken in anything from the environment that you were dropped into, you should be different. And should not change completely? No. Who you are foundationally, yes, you should be that person in morality. But how do you do that? Tell your 20 to 30-year-old population, Zach, how do you do that? Because I think this is important, because this is what we run back to, buddy. We get on this phone and we try to answer all our questions, and that's the antithesis to what we opened the conversation with.
Yeah, there's no one answer, right? Because different people's minds operate differently, even in the first place. Some people are verbal thinkers and they have an inner dialogue, and some people I've come to learn genuinely don't, and they're more spatial and ethereal in their thinking and their thought patterns. And that's a very fascinating thing to explore. And I'm the verbal one. I have an inner dialogue, and it's very, very active, sometimes too active to my own detriment. But so that I can't necessarily tell someone else how to get their mind right, nor do I claim to be an authority on that for anyone. I'll just do my best if they have that other way of operating in their mind. So I've worked with some people that do have that way of operating, and I have helped them get themselves together in certain ways. But again, that's a first, thing to think of as well. But beyond that, things are so individualistic, right? There's different traumas or emotional habits and things that people have been through and do experience that are going to present different blockages in being able to figure oneself out and face oneself. Travel is an interesting thing, but I think a lot of times it can be escapism, and it's like a very glamorous thing to just say, yeah, go somewhere else. Well, I heard a wonderful phrase that I do think is very true as well, in that wherever you go, there you are. So you can go from here to over there, and over there might be very different, but if you're still the same inside, you're just bringing your same BS to over there. And over a long enough time frame, unless you are fixing that and working on whatever's going on, it's just going to start to permeate into the external world over there, just like it was here. Now, that said, there's definitely validity to new external circumstances being able to be a catalyst for internal change as well, because locations and different people and environments can solidify and reinforce and correspond with emotions and thoughts and mental habits. But it's not as simple as just go somewhere else, you'll be different. No, you still have to do the work no matter where you are. So it's just another tool.
So talk to me about your hypothesis there. Apply that to leadership. Apply that to leading other people, formally and informally.
In regards to leading other people, you have to understand that a team isn't made up of a bunch of yous. Now, some leaders might want to do that, and that might not necessarily even be the best outcome if you just clone yourself a bunch of times. But yeah, ultimately, leadership it's about who you're leading more so than it is about who you are and
Right.
your leadership. It's not about who you are. It's about who you're
Right.
trying to connect with. Because I can deliver one message in one way, and it's exactly what David needs to hear to get fired up and to accomplish whatever needs to be accomplished. But that same energy presented to Ralph, that might make him shrivel up and
Yeah.
resent me and disconnect. So you can't just ramrod one leadership style and expect it to work for everybody. Now, if your creed and philosophy is, well, I'm going to ramrod that, and whoever falls by the wayside is not meant to be here, and whoever resonates, okay, that's a strategy. But if you are looking to connect with every individual in front of you, it is about understanding where they're coming from and how to get
Yeah.
them to where they, where
Yeah.
you need.
So that takes work, doesn't it? There's a little play on words in there that you did when you said you don't you're not leading a bunch of U's. Is that YOU or is that EWE? I write I write about people being sheeple, right? And people just kind of getting in line and doing what's natural and feels comfortable, and that's the non-growth area. You don't grow that way. So when you said that, the two things popped into my mind. You're not leading a bunch of ewes, you're leading a bunch of sheep. Because if you are leading a bunch of sheep, it's pretty easy. You just ring the bell and they all do the same thing. Right? and sometimes people lead that way. Sometimes people think, well, what you just described, I just ring the bell and they all do the same thing, and that's not true. There's a lot of work in there. So Zach, what's your passion, man? What do you what are you gonna do? You got a lot in front of you, man. You got a lot of time in front of you. What's your thing?
What's my passion? Dislike a lot of what I see in the world, and I dislike a lot of the suffering that I see, and I just wish to ease that. I genuinely have a passion for positively impacting the lives of others, and doing that very much through conversation, like we said right at the beginning
Sure.
here. There's just so much that is artificial and damaging and just genuinely disturbing in
Mm-hmm.
this world to so many large extents that are honestly incomprehensible to the average mind. I've been down a lot of rabbit holes and I've seen behind the veil of why things are operating the way they are and how intertwined and interconnected all of the entities and institutions and assorted branches of evil and how they're operating. And I've seen what that's doing to people, and I can't sit idly by and not speak my mind and say what I at least believe in the moment to be truthful in order to impact people.
Describe your evil. Describe that.
Well, I've observed, and to the point where I'm confident saying I know, that there are entities out there. We can call them human, we can call them demons, you could call them something else, you could call it Satan, you could call it just evil people. There are people out there that genuinely want suffering, that genuinely want destruction of humanity, that genuinely want extinctionism to be the prevailing thought in society where everyone is just killing themselves and killing each other. And I genuinely think that there are dark and evil forces in this world that specifically, it's not that they just don't care that it's happening. I think there's genuinely forces that want suffering. It's not money. Money's printable. It's genuinely wanting suffering and feeding off of that like parasite.
So I'm a Christian man, so I believe in evil. Because
Yeah.
if you're a Christian man, you got to fight it every day because it's right there.
Yeah.
There's evil. There's evil in flesh. There's evil in money. There's evil in other humans, and so I don't disagree with you. Wherever you fall in your level of belief, I agree with you. So describe to me your crusade. You're the knight in shining armor. How are you going to stamp out all this evil?
Well,
Where do we
I don't.
start?
I think it's bigger than just one man, but I think ultimately the world is a collective of those that are within it.
Mm-hmm.
And so as I operate, I try to be as benevolent as I can. I try to be a positive resonation that, resonates into the world and then can feed back into other people, whether it's directly or just energetically. And I'm doing the best I can. I think one of the ultimate thing that someone can do is raise a healthy family. And so I look forward to having many children and raising them as optimally and healthily as I can, both in mind, body, and spirit. And then by that regard, I live on forever. If they go on to have next generations, then I can have a positive impact far more than I can within this lifetime. Beyond family goals, I'm working with the organization I am right now, beatcancer.org. I'm running that as best I can with my business partner, and we're easing people's suffering and educating people so that they don't have to suffer needlessly from cancer. So that's one thing, and that's huge, and that's really important and really exciting. And then beyond that, building my podcast and my show, which is small at the moment, but I do have intentions to bring it to the large scale. And in that way, be able to just impact people in all different ways. I've had conversations on the show from anything from gut health to biological dentistry to sexual abuse trauma to working with David and everything that he's been through, talking about the psychological occurrences that happen when someone's active military and how to cope with that. But I just want to keep having these conversations and getting this information out there, and what that will evolve into specifically in that brand and that podcast. But I'm taking the steps that I see in front of me as quickly as I can.
What do you want my listeners to know? First of all, tell us what your podcast is, but what do you want my listeners to know? Because now you've picked the scab, right? You're a liar if you tell me you don't have some pain in it. Some physical, emotional pain. What do you want my listeners to know?
Well, what I want listeners to know is that I guess it doesn't have to be the way that it is currently, right? I think a lot of people just give in to the drudgery of suffering that they experience. And different people have different circumstances, and different people are suffering in different ways from different things. And while I do think suffering in some capacity is a constant and just a given of the human experience, it doesn't have to be the way that it is currently forever. And I think it starts with comprehending things if you ever want to change it, and understanding that there are other people out there that are going through circumstances and making it out. And it all comes down to health, and that's why the name of my show, to answer the other part of your question there, the show is called The Health King's Court: Ancient Wisdom, Modern Health. And it's a very purposeful name because ultimately it all comes down to health. Everything is health, and something is either healthy or unhealthy. And it doesn't get much more basic than that, right? And so I talk about things that will bring us a healthy body, but also things that'll help us have healthy minds and healthy souls and healthy relationships. Ignoring any of these kind of buckets that are meant to be poured into with effort and time and knowledge will end up just dragging all of the others down anyway. If you ignore any of those, your body, your mind, your soul, or your relationships, eventually things come crashing down in some way that has a negative impact on just your entire human experience. So I just encourage people to take their health seriously.
So I do a little tutorial that I learned when I went to the Center for Creative Leadership in South Carolina. It's where they send highly accomplished CEOs and stuff to get dissected, to get internally dissected. And one of the things at the end that they talked about was this life balance that you're talking about. And the visual that they used was a big circle that was a perfectly symmetrical circle, which is your life. And inside of it were 4 perfectly symmetrical circles. They're exact same size. And one represented your home life, one represented your spirit, your emotional side, one represented your health side, and then your family, that piece. So, and the object is to keep your bubbles symmetrical and all the same size, right? Everything, that's the perfect state of health. So what do you tell people that says, that sounds all fine and dandy, Zach, but I'm raising kids and I got to work a second job to make ends meet. And so I don't have time to go to the gym. I don't have time to do push-ups, and I definitely don't have time to read the Bible or just, to meditate or to work on my inner self. And so I'm out of balance.
Well, I'll tell you then that's your choice, right? We have time for what we make time for. And I say that as someone, look, I'm not perfect. I get fucking stressed. I take on so many responsibilities and feel often that I don't have the time for everything because this, because that. But again, I don't claim to be a saint here, right? When I come on these podcasts, a lot of the times I end up saying things. I'm like, I should listen to that more. So I don't claim to be perfect, but what I tell people is that the time is going to pass no matter what, and you're going to be doing something in that time, right? And so we can just arrange what we do in that time to try to work towards a better tomorrow. It ends up, I keep going in these circles of like just grand philosophical things.
No, it's good. It's but people need to hear it.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, what do you really want? How bad, and what do you really want, and how bad do you really want it? That's what it comes down to. Because if it's completely unacceptable for you to live a shit existence, then you're going to change it. If and listen, not everyone's going to win. And that's a big thing too. Not everyone's going to make it out. And I think that's important to do too. It's important to mention too, because not everybody is going to get their shit together. So do you want to be one of the people who gets their shit together and wins, whatever winning looks like for you? Or do you want to be the people that just suffer and live a mediocre and shit existence until you die? A lot of people do the latter. And it's easy to do. And so it's just, how much effort do you want to put into this life? And in which direction do you want to put that effort? Your results will be in accordance to that. And a big part of the effort thing too is understanding that it is effort to get your health in order in any of the realms that we talked about: body, mind, soul, relationships. Beyond, and an important thing to understand as well is that it's effort to even figure out how to do those things, because the default of every single one of them that's perpetuated in modern life is backwards, it's inverted, and it's setting you up for failure. What the modern structures tell you leads to a healthy body is bullshit. What leads to a healthy mind, a healthy relationship, they don't even talk about souls. They want you to think that you're a soulless random being. And the defaults of health for everything are wrong. So it takes effort to figure that out, see through it, and seek the alternatives in this crazy inverted world. But what else in life is worth doing, right? The alternative to doing that is just existing in the average way. And average is getting worse year by year. Average people are getting fucking crushed. So if you want to stay average, you're just going to slowly get decimated and not feel good the whole time. You could try to cope your way out of it. You could try to drug your way out of it. You could try to excuse your way out of it. But that's suffering that's not worthwhile. The suffering that comes from putting the work in to actually make improvements and changes and gain knowledge, that's suffering that at least in the end you could look back and say, wow, that was worth it. Or at least it has a chance of being. You're going to be suffering either way. So I guess just choose your suffering.
I love it. So now, here's the thing is, the American society is probably guilty of this more so than even some other cultures worldwide. Stop looking for the answer to your problem somewhere else, through some program, some funding, if I just had this or if somebody gave me that. Quite frankly, everything that you take it from the old guy here. Everything, I'm right. Your name in the podcast as I'm talking, so I'm writing it down. It's pretty cool. Choose your suffering. What suffering is worthwhile, and that's pretty profound, actually. Everything that I have, the things that I have on my wall, the stuff that I have around me, required effort, required preparation, required my time, required my focus, required my dedication, required my learning, required a lot of things. And in there is time, and time is valuable. But anything that I've ever accomplished in life that was given to me, handed to me, or I compromised and kind of just went with the average, as you say, I don't appreciate. The jack between a rental car and a four-wheel drive pickup. There's places that you won't take a four-wheel drive pickup. But when you rent a car, it's not yours. You'll drive it through every pothole in any place, right? Because you're turning it back in. Don't treat your body, soul, and your mind like that. Treat it like it's something that you're invested in, that is yours. It needs longevity. It needs oil changes. It needs, you to check on things. It needs you to, when it makes a noise, it needs you to stop and pay attention to that and get it fixed if it needs to be fixed. Whatever those things are, instead of just blowing through it and treating yourself and your mind and your soul like it's a rental car. Stop it.
It's funny you say that, because it just made me think of something that I've heard and now I say as well, in that at the same time as you're saying that, and that is very true, everything is actually rented. Everything's rented. Or health is rented, right? You have to consistently pay that rent.
Right.
Otherwise it's going to slip away. Your relationship's rented. If you stop putting effort into that, that's going to go away. Everything is rented. And it just goes back into what we were saying earlier, in that you just have to keep putting effort. You just have to keep putting effort into things. And, it's difficult to do that. It's difficult for a lot of reasons. The reasons are that it's made difficult purposefully, in that, the structures of the world have so wonderfully crafted this system where you have to chase these jobs to get these money to pay for stuff that keeps going up in price. I mean, $1 is meaningless. $1 is worth less than 1% of what $1 used to be.
Yeah, I told my wife yesterday, I said, 1,000 is the old 100 and 100 is the old 20.
Yeah, and so look, it's difficult. It's so difficult right now. It's more difficult now than it's ever been for people to get themselves together financially. So then they have less resources, less time, less money to buy different things. So I get that it's very difficult. And again, I don't claim to be perfect either. I'm still getting myself together in life
Mm,
as well. But so the reasons are, yeah, they make it difficult to get the resources to even do anything. They also make it difficult because the defaults of society make you so unhealthy that you can't even think because your brain is full of so many toxic chemicals. Your body
mhm.
is so inundated with garbage that it drains your energy even more. But again, there's some common
Uh,
themes here in that understanding these things that are going on will at least give you a chance of making it because then you can see where you are and then see what's happening and know what you have to fight against. It's those that just kind of exist and don't question why things are the way they are and what's going on that just find themselves kind of conveyor belt into into the machine. I don't know. At the same time, I say that because I'm an overthinker. So maybe that's just cope on my side. Because
well,
there are people that just ignorantly put effort into something and then end up making a great life too.
I'm gonna help you out a little bit because I love where you're going, especially at the age that you're at. What you've realized is your current situation, and you've done the work, right? So you said they 3 times. They put junk in your body. They make your money worthless. Who's they? Who's they?
Well, that's a fascinating question, right? It could go back to what we were saying at the beginning. Evil. Evil has different names that you can name. Groups of people do certain things, right?
I'm not. I don't want you to give me names, and I don't want you to give me departments or governments or any of that type of stuff. But here's where the separation starts. Zach knows that there's his machine, his rental car, his 4-wheel drive pickup, whatever it is. Zach knows that it's making a noise. Instead of looking around, asking everybody, "Do you hear the same noise?" and everybody says, "Yeah, I hear the same noise," and just kind of falling in line and going along with it. You know that something's not right. So you've done some exploration. You've come to some conclusions based on at least the data that you have. You may not have everything, but everything is hard to get. At least the data, you've come to some conclusions. And what you realize, and you call it evil, no matter whatever form that comes in, inanimate or animate, you call that evil. You realize that there's a force working against your overall holistic health. You're just your ability to live in some level of harmony, because we all know life is going to throw a curveball. I mean, we could get off this podcast and in 5 minutes you and I could be in some major catastrophe that we never would imagine, just because that's how life works. It's just what happens. But what I applaud is where you are generationally and where you are in age is that what you're describing is I've got to take control of my stuff myself. My mother, who was born in 1934, God bless her, she died a year ago. My mother, she's 89 years old. She was born in 1934. So when she was born, Nazi Germany was coming to rise. By the time she was able to remember things, World War II was in its full throes. And by the time World War II was over, she was 11 years old. She used to tell me constantly, it was her generation that started this phenomenon that you're fighting against. So you can blame that generation. Now there's a show on television that was called Happy Days. I don't know if you're
I'm aware of it, but yeah.
okay. So and the Fonz was on Happy Days. And the reason that show was called Happy Days is because it was happy days. We had come out of the war. We were the industrial might of the world. We made everything for everybody. Everything was financially driven off of the dollar. There was nothing that you wanted for in America, and everything was dirt cheap. Big muscle cars that got 4 miles to the gallon. It didn't matter. You just filled it up, right? Everything was in abundance. When that started to happen, as my mother explains, when that started to happen, they started making decisions about this family thing that you talk about. They started making decisions differently. Her mother, my grandmother, who was basically my second parent, was a product of the Depression. They were two different people. My mother was frugal only in the fact that because she was a single mother in the 1960s and 70s and the 80s, that was not an optimal place for a woman to be in that time frame. You weren't going to get a really high paying job. You're going to do secretarial work. She did fine by the end, but we just didn't have a lot of money. But as far as being frugal, my mom, she wanted to have fun and go out and do good stuff. My grandmother, she saved every milk carton and every glass bottle and all of those type of things because it's two different thoughts, two different thought processes. I think what you just described, Zach, is at least people that are higher functioning. So don't criticize yourself for your mind working. It just means you're vibrant and you're alive and you're actually deducing things, which is important because you don't want to be a zombie. But I think where your generation is almost back to where my grandmother is. You've realized that it's not all sitting there for you, and you've got to do the work.
Yeah, history is a very funny thing, and I think since World War II times and post World War II, there has been a slow and very effective infiltration and subversion of the American government, as well as every single institution of the world, as well as every single Western government, really, and even more than that. It's a very fascinating thing when you start to look at who has worked their way into certain power structures, and really every single one. Yeah, World War II was a very fascinating time, and we know the news is fake now, right? And there's people that will walk around thinking that there was some common cold actually killing everybody for the last couple of years. And that's what's going to go down in history. So I think it's important to encourage people to understand that perhaps if you know the news is fake and they're lying to people about what's going on in front of their very eyes, perhaps everything that we've been told about history is actually inverted. And sometimes the good guys aren't the good guys. Sometimes the bad guys aren't the bad guys. And a lot of the times, if not every single time, nothing is actually as it seems. So that's important to understand, because then that relates into history and what's going on right now, what's going on in the assorted institutions. And it's very interesting to look at what ended up happening in our government, in our media, in our different industries, and there's an infiltration and subversion of the Western nations. That's just factual. And there's a very strong force that is driving it all into the ground. See, a lot of people think what's going on is just due to ignorance, or is, oh, wow, the leadership is so stupid. Again, it goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning. No, these people know what they're doing. It takes time to do it, and they're driving this world into the ground. They're very calculated people, and they know what they're doing. That's the difference. The greatest thing evil does is convince, the world that they don't exist, right? It's, oh yeah, no, these leaders, they're just dumb. I can't believe it. But yeah, you're absolutely correct. That time was a very pivotal time. And since then, the machines and the people and the entities that have been working to destroy societies have been implementing baby step, certain things to subvert the dollar, to subvert the family unit, to subvert the mind, to poison the food, to poison the water. And yeah, we're seeing generations of brainwashing and normalization of certain degeneracies of, again, the mind, the soul, and the body, and perversions of all sorts and mutilations of all of the wonderful God-given things. And we're seeing the effects of that. So yeah, we are very far down the road of subversion of humanity. And yeah, we're seeing a lot of very interesting things now, because the age of the internet is allowing people to speak more than they were in previous times, right? And while there are lots of avenues of censorship if you speak out against certain people or certain things, there are also too many of us saying things now. And we live in very fascinating times. And I think each generation has its unique challenges, and each generation has its unique strengths. And while, the economy is worse than ever, the food is worse than ever, the family units are worse than ever, social media presents a lot of challenges, technology itself presents a lot of challenges, and everyone's mind is fried. The generation that's coming up now also has, in a way, more opportunity than ever before. So it's always been shit for some reason. It's always been good for other reasons. You are 100% correct that the boomer generation got decadent, and they just completely threw the world to the winds, and just kind of continued to hand everything over to those that wanted to drive it into the ground. But I've been speaking for a while, so I'm going to let you chime in.
Oh, I love it. We can go 1,000 directions with that. We're really hedging on some things that'll make somebody that listens to this goes growth. Once you're uncomfortable, you start to grow. So I went to Sweden this year, part tourism trip, part getaway, and part hunting trip. And from the minute that I got off of the plane and got picked up by the hunting outfitter, great guy, everybody that I ran into, I was around more affluent Swedes. I mean, we mixed with the people in the city, the normal everyday to day people. They speak great English. But the majority of my time was spent around more affluent Swedes. You would have thought that I was their long lost uncle that they had known for 1,000 years, the way they wanted to talk about our presidential election. And so what do I think? What does it look like? And I said, well, what do you think? And they said, we're scared to death for our sovereignty. Putin really bothers us. And we think that the only option is Trump, and Trump has to get elected. So we'll just leave it at that. That needs to be said for my part of the story. I don't care who voted for who. Thank goodness we voted. I hope it was all free and fair. And God bless you. Right? So that's a whole other podcast that's a 3-hour podcast. So, but what I finally did, the way they were picking around the edges and they wanted to know things, because in a way if there's such a thing in Sweden, they were kind of capitalist. I said, what runs America? What's the foundation to the American economic base? And to a man, these are smart guys, all guys. There's a few women, but most of the true big business owners were men. And I said, what do you think foundation runs America? And they said, well, small business. And I said, no. I said, that's not even close. And they said, what? And I said, the military industrial complex, because everything is tied to that. And I said, a lot of the things that make immense amounts of money and we leverage for our negotiations around the world are tied to the military industrial complex. And by the way, if you make a bomb, if you don't drop it, you can't make another one. I just left it at that. And they pondered that. And I think it really it set them off a little bit. And I said, this is not novel. When Eisenhower on his last day as president warned us against this, against being very careful. So when you talk about evil, you also have to talk about what motivates evil, because these people that are truly evil may be working against us, maybe making bad water, bad food, bad medicine, all the things that go. They're working, there's something in it for them too, Zach. And when you understand what motivates them, then you can better configure your life and your way to navigate around them and to get to goodness. The things that you talked about, controlling your family and making sure that, what you control is good and righteous.
Yeah. America is the military branch of worldwide evil. You have to understand that the evil of the world is not relative to countries. Countries are just tools of control for different things. They used to mean something, but now they're just different ways and different subsects of controlling people. But the entities that are running these countries are far beyond individual nations. They're globalists. They don't care about particular communities. There's one they care about. And that one is running all of the rest. And what you're going to say something?
No. This is deep. This is deep. And I told everybody, we're going to run down rabbit holes. But your passion is predicated on what you've consumed, the effort and time that you've put in to better understand this, so that you can navigate the world. And generationally, you guys are going to be up against this because you need to understand this. And I tell you one thing. They're not having this conversation in 99% of the higher education institutions in America.
Yeah.
We're not allowed to have this conversation in an open classroom format. And if we did, violence would break out.
Oh, absolutely. And when you look at who you cannot criticize, you'll see who controls you.
Correct.
That's true. And what's a fascinating, completely random fact, Dave, about myself that's interesting? Myself, I am a full 50% ethnically Jewish by blood. Just random fun fact, unrelated to any of this conversation.
Okay.
Just gonna throw that out there.
Do you think that when people listen to this, do you think that's going to change how they?
I think it's a fascinating thing if they understand, the actualities of what we've been referring to in a lot of this conversation. I think it's interesting.
So here's a story for all my viewers, because everybody knows I have a story, and this will just springboard you to the next comment. So I'm in Saudi Arabia. I did a year in Turkey during Desert Storm. Desert Storm is we're in the non-shooting part of it. It's still an actual conflict, but we're in the ceasefire phase of it. I go back to Saudi Arabia. I'm working in a place out in the middle of nowhere, and I'm the only medic, right? I'm the doc. I have a guy cuts a tendon in his thumb. I load him up, bandage him up, and take him down to the local Saudi hospital to find an orthopedic surgeon to fix his tendon. So I talked to the surgeon. He's got a cigarette in one mouth and hanging out of his mouth, and a cup of coffee in his other hand. And we're talking about this tendon and how to fix it. And he says, yeah, bring your guy back tomorrow and we'll take him to the operating room. And I said, well, I'm not going to let you operate on him unless I'm in there. And he says, fine. He says, just do first assist. So I scrub in with him. So now I'm hostage, right? I'm hostage. We're fixing this guy's tendon. It takes about between, 30 to 45 minutes to fix it. You got 15 minutes to put him to sleep. So I'm hostage for about 2 hours, scrubbed in, you're sterile. So you can't be running around, jumping around, can't get up and leave, that kind of stuff. And we're taking care of the guy's thumb. And he looks at me across the guy's hands there, and he's on one side and I'm on the other. And he looks at me and he says, do you know what the problem with America is? I said, what? He goes, it's all run by Jews. And I looked at him, he couldn't see my facial expressions because I had a mask on. And I said, what? And he goes, yeah. He said, America will continue to be full of infidels, and non-holy people. America needs to go away as long as you have the Jewish influence that you had. Now, how do I process that? But this guy, this is a deep-seated belief. And because he had an American service member hostage in this environment where I couldn't run away, he chose to lay that belief on me. It's the first time I'd ever heard that. I'm not Jewish. I'm definitely American. I'm not Jewish, but I have a high regard for the Jewish people and the Jewish state and Israel. I mean, they're God's people, right? So I just get to be one of the Gentiles that got carried along because the good Lord lets us come along, right? So what do you do with that? No, I didn't go back and burn the guy's house down. I didn't mark his name off the list. He did a great job on the guy's thumb. He's a good orthopedic surgeon. But what do you do with that? Because that's what's out there. And that you don't hear that in a deli in downtown XYZ. It's not going to be said out loud that way. But there's so many people that are on such different sides of all of this. And in this melting pot that we live in, we're all commingled. It's complicated, especially at your age right now. Because I think a lot of people have discussions that they're not fully informed of.
Yeah, absolutely. And, obviously the caveat to any conversation of generalizations is that when certain groups of people have individuals within them that are doing bad things, that doesn't mean that every single person of that group is bad. Anyone that can't see beyond that is just stupid.
But wouldn't you say we have a problem with that right now? Bias, no courage, no convert. This is a 360-degree now.
That's where things get corrupted, though, because generalizations and assumptions and forming thoughts based on what we observe, that's life. That's a built-in survival mechanism. If you see a person who is green and yellow for some reason, and all those green and yellow people always seem to chop people's heads off. Well, you're probably going to cross the street when you see a green and yellow person. And that's good. That's a built-in survival mechanism. It's pattern recognition, right? And so people do get caught up in overgeneralization, but it's like a false love and light bullshit trap to pretend like you're ever going to stop generalizing either. Because patterns exist.
No, but when you talk from your stance of growing internally, your spirit, your emotional growth, your emotional intelligence, when you talk about that, if we try to grow beyond just flat acceptance of that and say, I see this and I know it might not be right. So to your green and yellow person, I will give you young black kid with a hoodie on. How do cops approach people like that? Why do black families teach their black children get out of the hoodie, how to act when cops are around, and those type of things? Because the cops, the green and yellow person's eating people, because that's happened, they get a generalization, and then we have a whole societal reaction to every time we're in that situation. And to some people, that's not savory. So you have to operate at a higher level to close that gap, so that you can start better compartmentalizing it the appropriate way, so that you can navigate through all spaces.
It's important to not demonize either side and to just operate within reality, because honestly, the reality is that generalization happened in officers' minds because, unfortunately, a lot of young black men in hoodies did a lot of bad things. And
right, and yes, But we have to operate at a mature enough level that we can sit here like you and I are having this conversation and agree on both those points. Yeah. The cops react because they've been conditioned to react because negative things have happened from people that look like that, right?
Yeah.
However, everybody that looks like that is not going to kill a cop. That's just not the truth. So how do you close? This is my mission. How do you operate at a high enough emotional intelligence level that you ask the questions and close the gap in a way that you give people the opportunity to talk?
It's. Are you talking about like the police scenario or just in general?
Well, I'll give you an easier scenario, because this is it's emotionally charged, and I'll probably get 10,000 comments on this podcast, which is great because I want people to think. I'll give you a better example. The Hispanic community in America has really had a tough time with aligning with national level politicians. Everybody wants the Hispanic vote, and they try to talk the Hispanic needs. But when you say Hispanic, I mean, Cubans are not Mexicans. Puerto Ricans, they're not Haitians or Colombians, South America. It's just they're not. And they even the little bit of Spanish that I speak, I can speak really well to Mexicans and Puerto Ricans. I get around Cubans and I can barely understand, because it's just the whole thing's different, right?
Yeah.
So you probably relate to that. So I say that because I was talking to a Mexican down in Arizona. He's a naturalized citizen, grew up in Mexico. And I said to him, what is the deal with the Hispanics in our electoral process in this all of this confusion? Because I understand the different subcultures. And he said to me, he said, Dave, nobody has ever came and talked to us. And I said, what do you mean? And he goes, nobody has sat down and talked to us. He goes, everybody makes assumptions. They just assume that we're all Catholic. We all vote a certain way. We all think. He goes, they just assume this. If somebody would stop for 5 minutes and have a conversation with us, they'd find out that there's about 7 or 8 different strategies they need to have with Hispanics. Not one. And the one that they're doing doesn't work. So now we got to make up our own minds. So we end up picking the least of the ignorant assholes that's out there for us to choose from.
Yeah. It's really funny how those that emphasize so much, like the diversity and inclusion and, oh no, don't be racist, are the ones that end up being super racist because they like pander to certain groups. I don't call them minorities because that's even a false language trick even in itself, but different groups like, Hispanics and etc. that they just treat them like children and like dummies, It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Because if you don't look like me, there's something wrong. Yeah. Which is a high form of bias. You can call it prejudice, but it's a high functioning form of bias. When I was working with senior leaders in the military, me being one of them, but usually they were my boss, colonel generals. I used to love the Christmas parties because at their first Christmas party as a leader of an institution, I would take them to the Christmas party and I'd say, we're going to walk into this room and I want you to tell me the first thing that you see. So they're leading an organization of 200, 300, 500, 600,000 people, maybe more. And you walk into the Christmas party, and what do you think the room looks like? If it had 10 tables, there would be 8 tables with white people at it, 1 table with Hispanic people at it, and 1 table with black people. It was a direct correlation to our societal population density, our diversity. Yet I would say, all the black people that are sitting at the same table, I said, some of those people don't even know each other. They're meeting for the first time. But they all chose to sit there because that's where they're comfortable. That's what they look like. To break through all of that is a lot of freaking work, Jack. It's a lot of work.
I think it's also important to recognize that it is okay to want to be with people that look like you and have your same culture. That's natural. Listen, people are different. And whether it's an innate psychological, physiological, biological thing, there's evidence of that, or it's just cultural or some combination of the two, it's okay to want to be with people that are like you. Listen, the lowest crime and highest trust societies are those that are homogeneous. That's just facts. And yeah, there's certain homogeneous communities that do kill each other a lot, and then we could get into why that is, but the facts are that the happiest, healthiest, highest trust places are homogeneous.
Yeah.
And that's just what it is. And then you could get into this overall societal occurrences where those high trust homogeneous societies get a bunch of third world migrants imported into them to purposely dismantle and destabilize it. And wow, look what would you know? Crime, rape, murder. Again, who's doing it?
Right.
And on the wall, you can see who's doing it.
And your local governments and law enforcement aren't equipped to bring in this new society into what they're managing and leading.
You can't. Yeah. Oil and water don't mix. And this is not saying one is better or worse than the other. That's a whole whatever. It doesn't even matter. The point is, there are cultures that it's genuinely okay to, if you have a problem with someone, murder them. And like that it's just what they do. Whack them with a machete. That's just what they do. That's the rules they play by. And that's so you can't expect to take that person, drop them into a civilized Western nation, which is very unnatural. This civilization that we've built is very unnatural. It's not nature. Nature's tribalistic and violent. This like artificial polite society that's been built is like outside of the norm. And to take someone that hasn't generationally been bred into that norm and has no desire to assimilate to that norm and just drop them in, they know what they're doing. They're just the who's bringing them here knows what they're doing. They're just agents of chaos. They're just weapons of chaos. Unfortunately, is the fact. And that's not to say their life doesn't matter. That's not to say they're not whatever. But Yeah, I mean, agents of
So
chaos are being brought into society, and I don't know how we got here again, but you know,
I love it. You know why, Zach? Because the conversation has to be had. Because everything you described is reality. I don't care if you
yeah.
like it, if you don't like it, if you think, if, you
Well,
know,
that's
if
true.
you
And then when you speak up against it, depending on where you are, you either don't get believed, nobody cares, or you get straight up put in jail.
right, right,
In the
and
UK, if you say my daughter got raped by a migrant gang, and that's just a factual report of you saying that, you get put in jail.
yeah, there's a whole world out there, folks. There's a whole world out there.
People don't
No,
understand what's happening.
well, and so this podcast is really about the gross realities and the challenges of your generation. Not that I'm old enough now that I don't have to worry about it, but here we are. And if it's the boomers' fault, shame on us. If it's my mother's generation fault, which they post World War II, but if that's where it started, that's great. If it started when somebody stepped off a boat on the east coast of what is now the United States, who knows? Wherever it started, it's here and it's real. And to be all of those things that you wish that you advocate through your podcast and your work, to be that, you got to get off your ass and do the work because it's not going to come to you. I loved how you described average today versus average of yesterday, because average of yesterday was societally accepted.
Yeah,
Average,
it was
average,
acceptable, and it was in the soul acceptable. Because average for a man used to mean that you can work some job. Some job, it's probably going to be difficult. It might be shit. It might beat up your body. It might really suck. But you could probably find a job, work at it, find a woman, have children. She watches over the kid loves you, the wife loves you maybe get a dog, you have a house, and you could actually live. It was acceptable in the soul. Forget societally acceptable. It was acceptable in the soul.
yeah, you were comfortable. Yeah,
You
were
don't get
comfortable
that
with
now.
yourself.
You don't get that now. Average means, especially as a man, nobody cares about you. You can't find a job that pays decently. You can't, even if you do, you can't barely afford rent, let alone, a house. You can't, again, just in general, people, it's difficult to find a virtuous woman out there for a lot of men. Not saying they don't exist, but the women's minds have been so corrupted that if you do find yourself in a relationship, she hates you and she expects you to behave like a woman and not be a man. You have a kid, they get put on social media and sent off to a government institution. They get their mind degenerated and perverted. Like, that's average existence. That's not acceptable in a man's soul. Like, there's no way to not just completely give up and get crushed or just have to fight. And we were going back earlier and saying, like, who is they? There is an enemy. Like, the whatever you want to call them. The point is, I think as a man, we need an enemy. Whether it is an entity or just the overall forces of the world that want us to be unwell, we kind of need an enemy. I feel like the masculine spirit, the masculine essence needs a fight. You need a battle. We're supposed to be warriors. The problem is that warrior spirit has been so forgotten and bred out of people and societally and culturally worked out of men. And that's why you see men just rolling over and dying and just giving up and being hopeless and being depressed and being suicidal and being on drugs and doing all this degenerate behavior and being hedonistic to just try to chase any sort of pleasure because life sucks. And it's only getting worse unless you are able to fight your way out of it. And you can only fight your way out of it if you understand that you're in a fight.
Folks, that's Zach. Tell us how to get a hold of you, Zach. Tell us what you're written, what your podcast is, what your website is.
So the name of my show is called The Health King's Court, Ancient Wisdom, Modern Health. I say ancient wisdom because nothing I'm talking about is new. I don't claim to be bringing anything brand new to the table. Right. Everything that is old is new again. Everything that's new has been here once before. And it's what is ancient and what is natural and what is good and what is just a given. That is what is right and ultimately what is true and what is good. So it's nothing new. There's nothing new under the sun. We're just bringing it back to light because we've been led so far down an artificial road. And modern health because, well, we're trying to be healthy in these modern times, and it's not going to look the same as what it looked like for our ancestors because we're on a different playing field. So that's why I tie in the two. You can find it on wherever you listen to your podcasts. You could also go to zakthehealthking.com. That's ZAK, thehealthking.com. The podcast is there. You can find my other guest appearances as well. You can find everything else that I'm up to. That's where you can find me.
Folks, I want you to understand something. Zach and I talked about some things that may have made some this far. I want you to understand something. Number one, if you're uncomfortable, the Kangaroo Leadership Podcast and Dave say good. Because if you're uncomfortable, it gives you an opportunity to grow. So do with that uncomfortableness what you do with it. Hopefully you put it to good work and help yourself grow and expand a little bit. The other thing is I don't know how you saw this, but here's how I saw it. Zach didn't say any of that out of hate or disrespect. In fact, it's all predicated on love and love of humanity and love of his fellow human being. And so when we start to operate at that level, things start to get better. So Zach, you're doing your part, probably more than most. And it's refreshing to me, a man of my age, to see a man of your age out there moving and shaking and forming opinions based on what you know and helping people. So God bless you, brother.
Thank you, man. There's far too much suffering in the world, and I'm just doing my part to ease it, not just within my own self and those around me, but in the world at large. And am I always right? No, definitely not. But I'm doing the best I can, and I encourage others to do so as well.
Yeah, I know you are. So, on behalf of the Kangaroo Podcast, Kangaroo Leadership Podcast, guess what? You probably have one of the longer episodes, and this one's going to rock it. So I can't wait to get it out there, brother. Thank you
We'd
so
love
much.
to do it again anytime, man.
On behalf of the world and the Kangaroo Leadership Podcast, get out there, move forward, go onward, and get better.